Mats.
Wrong drop.
Do you like fantasy football and sports betting? Come join us here at the Parlay Fantasy Football Podcast, where hosts Matt, Shane, and Jason talk about fantasy players, lineups, and sports betting to help you compete and win championships. And of course, some extra cash. Let's jump right into the show.
Well, we are back. We are back for another episode of the Parlay Fantasy Football Podcast. Matt, Shane, and Jason in the house with you guys tonight. And we do have a special guest with us again, okay, guys? I told you we were going to have another one here now, and we got one. So, but before we get to introductions and all that, if you guys want to follow us on our social media accounts, you can find myself at Matt_ParlayFF. You can find Jason at JasonParlayFF. And you can find Shane at ShaneParlayFF on the old X machine. Again, guys, we love you. We thank you so much for subscribing and continue to support the podcast. It's a grind. It's a grind out here when you're recording podcasts and trying to do all your research and data and all that kind of stuff. So we can't thank you enough for just continuing to share and support the podcast, guys. If you want to, head over to parlaypod.com. That is our official website. Shane's been doing a wonderful job managing that. We do actually have 2 official writers for us now. So, we'll sprinkle some here and there in the off season as far as articles go. Once the season starts, it's going to be full bore. All right. Obviously, you guys know we do a lot of sports betting on this podcast as well. So we're going to have a lot of that stuff going on the site as well this year. Patreon page. I know, guys, I told you I'd have that thing launched by now, but we're still grinding out a few things. Some little things are a little bit more intricate than what was expected. So, we're going to have that out as soon as I possibly can. And then you guys will have access to all our full bets if you get a subscription over there, okay? Yeah, you can find us too on this live stream, guys, is Parlay FF Pod on YouTube. So head over there and you can see all 4 of us now. And if you are on that site already, spoiler alert, you can kind of see our guest already, but we will have the introduction here shortly. So that being said, Shane and Jason, how are you guys doing tonight?
I am doing fantastic, sir. It is great to be back. I had a long haul to get here. I drove 8 hours yesterday and ended up just like crashing by the time I got home. And I'm so glad to be here with you guys, but I am still a little sleepy eyed. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, it's glad to see y'all's beautiful faces. We're in a weird moment in the sports world where there's nothing really good to watch besides baseball. So it's almost like we're getting teased by football. I think we're less than 70 days away. So, hey, we're almost there, baby.
That's right. That's right. I'm super excited. Well, I won't keep you guys waiting no more. All right. With that being said, guys, we have an amazing guest who I believe that actually the 3 of us are supporters of his podcast. So he does an amazing job with his phone football analyst. You guys need to go check that out because it's just amazing. But he is one of the hosts of the Football Guys Fantasy Football Podcast. So help me to welcome in Mr. Dave Kluge. How are we doing, bud?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me. Always fun getting to meet some new people in the industry, hear some fresh takes. Getting out of the chair alongside my co-host Alfredo Brown. Always fun to switch it up and talk to some new people. So excited to talk some ball today and get into a mock draft a little bit later.
Yeah, we are super excited to have you guys on the show. I listened to your podcast. You were one of the first podcasts I started listening to a few years back. So it was it's really cool that you accepted the invite to come on here, and we just can't thank you guys enough, or thank you enough for that as well. I know Shane and Jason, you guys listen too, right?
Oh, yeah. I was laughing because you had a hot take on Jaden Reed being the wide receiver 4 that everybody thinks is a wide receiver 1. And I was laughing because we talked about that literally like 2 episodes ago. And I was like, nice. I'm glad that we align on that thought process.
people were not happy about that take, and it's not so much like I think Jaden Reed is a good football player, but like when you look at it, he was a part-time player last year, and people look at like the small sample size and what he did as a pure slot receiver and say, well, if we just expand that route participation rate to 100%, he's going to be a wide receiver one. I don't know if that's the case though. Like, they like Christian Watson, and Romeo Dubs might not be like the sexiest receiver out there, but he does all the nitty gritty things that the coaches like, and he has kind of earned his role. So as much as I like Jaden Reed, I think a lot of his production last year was kind of inflated by a touchdown rate that's going to be pretty tough to sustain. And if he doesn't take that step forward, if he's not able to leapfrog ahead of Christian Watson or Romeo Dubs, which I don't expect him to, we're going to be looking at something pretty similar to what we saw last year, which is like a 50 to 60% snap share every single week. And if he's not scoring a touchdown per game like he did in the second half of the season last year, that's not a guy that you want in your fantasy lineups.
Oh yeah, not to mention everybody's darling sweetheart Dontavian Wicks out there, just also gobbling up that snap share.
Yeah, that wide receiver room in Green Bay is one of the toughest to get a read on, because the guy that people don't mention is Bo Melton, who also, like, if you look at what he did on a very small sample size, was unbelievable. Like his targets per route run were up there with like CeeDee Lamb, Keenan Allen, and Tyreek Hill. Of course, it's the same thing as Jaden Reed, just even more exaggerated on an even smaller sample size. But you look at what all of these guys did in their limited situations, they all did really well, and they might just run it back, and we might not have a really clear idea. We might just kind of see this rotation where Wicks is coming in and Melton is coming in and Jaden Reed is on and off the field. And it's, I think the thing to take away from that whole situation is just draft Jordan Love, because he is the guy that we know is good. And I don't really get a clear view of what the wide receiver room is going to look like, but I know Jordan Love is going to be able to support whoever it is catching those passes.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. That's awesome. You know what I did like too, before we jump into these questions here, I liked one of I think it was one of your guys' mock drafts where you were waiting to take RB until late, and you got, you were at that point, I think, where you had guys options like Brian Robinson and those
Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah, and you were like, I'm just gonna punt these players because you get the starter in Brian Robinson. You've got key players in Charbonnet and Blake Corum, who is going to be a factor, I feel like, this year. I loved that take on that, how you waited to take running backs until late.
Yeah, because when you take that approach, you can get yourself an elite quarterback, you can get yourself an elite tight end, you can get a whole core of starting good wide receivers. And last year, I can't tell you how many dynasty leagues I won starting Ty Chandler and Zamir White and Kyron Williams and guys that you were picking up off of waivers. And these guys pop up every single year. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know who it's going to be this year, but Zach Charbonnet, Trey Benson, Blake Corum, all these guys that are young and talented that are a tweaked ankle away from a massive workload. Those are the guys that I just want my entire bench to be filled with. If I've got 10 bench spots, 8 of those 10 bench spots are typically going to be running backs who are an injury away from production.
I like it. I like that. Jason, do you got the sheet in front of you? Why don't you ask Dave the first question?
Yeah. So when building a team, what is your first priority? Are you a value guy? Do you focus on following a specific kind of team build? Or are you someone who specifically targets only your guys that you've been looking at?
That's a good question, and I've changed a lot over the years. Like earlier when I was playing fantasy football, I was 100% like go out and get your guy type of drafter. It's changed a little bit for me, and I don't know if the way that I play is necessarily applicable to everybody else. I mean, I'm going to play in a few hundred best ball leagues. I'm going to be in 30 redraft leagues. I'm going to be in another dozen dynasty leagues. So because of that, I flatten my exposure out a little bit. I don't want to go all in, because I did that a few years back. Like Chris Carson was my ride or die. I had Chris Carson on every single team, and then he has this freak neck injury, and it's just impossible. Like it ruined my year basically. Like I couldn't contend in any teams because I'd sunk all of my third round picks into Chris Carson. So because of the volume that I play at and how many leagues that I'm in, I do play value quite a bit, and I will take players when they fall below ADP. We just did an episode on players that we will never draft. And I talked to Alfredo, my co-host, before, and I said, this is tough for me to talk about because I will draft any player at the right cost. So like a guy I talked about was Devontae Adams. And then right after we recorded that episode, I happened to a BBM draft on Underdog Fantasy. Devontae Adams falls to me at pick 23. And I said, well, I know I just said I've never drafted Devontae Adams, but I'm not going to pass on him at the end of round 2. And that's just when you're drafting as many teams as I am, you kind of have to be willing to admit that you're going to be wrong at some
Yeah.
places. But the one consistent thing that I do in just about every single league is try to lock in on elite wide receivers early. Like we just kind of
Mhm.
talked about with the team building where I had the Brian Robinson, Blake Corum, Zach Charbonnet type of build. That's what I find myself doing a lot because we're good at projecting wide receivers. If you look at ADP from wide receivers and then end of season finish just about every single year, the only guys that you're not going to see in there are guys who sustained injuries. And there's one or two of those guys every single year. But for the most part, we're really, really good at projecting wide receivers. Those are the safe guys that you can draft at the top of your draft. So I'm almost always trying to walk away with at least two wide receivers in the first 3 rounds.
Now, a spin-off question of that, do you track your exposure? I know that, Underdog does it for you, but do you track your exposure across all of your leagues like in a spreadsheet, or do you use like a companion app for those things, or uh,
Yeah, there's a website. Oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank right now. Is it Dynasty Planet? I think that you can track your dynasty exposure, and I use that. I've only drafted one redraft team so far, but once redraft season kicks off and I start drafting more and more teams, I'll have a spreadsheet to track all that for myself as well.
yeah, it's a lot to keep track of, especially the
It is.
thank God Underdog does it for you, because that would just be a nightmare if not.
That's one of the best features because I'll do that every day. I'm checking my exposure, but all of a sudden I'll look and be like, "Whoo, 28% Jonathan Brooks. Maybe I should pump the brakes a little bit on Jonathan Brooks," and that kind of keeps me in check.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I do have a question too. Um, when you are drafting, how important is it to you, like looking at the strength of schedule or bye weeks, uh, as a startup league, for instance? Like how often do you look at the strength of schedule of your players that you're looking to draft or their bye weeks? Because I've heard a lot of different opinions on this in the industry.
I don't almost
Okay.
at all. It's just not something that I really take into consideration. Typically, I'm somebody who's constantly playing the waiver wire early, trying to make trades and buy low. So what my team looks like the day that I drafted and what it looks like when bye weeks roll along, it's two very different teams typically. Like I am churning. I see those first 3 to 4 weeks of the season is kind of being the key time to take advantage of values and buy low, sell high, get players off the waiver wire. So, uh, I mean, I'll like in best ball, of course, where you're not making any roster changes, then I'll look towards
Yeah.
bye weeks and make sure that I'm not getting two quarterbacks with two tight ends with the same bye weeks. But in dynasty leagues and redraft leagues, that's such an afterthought. That's just kind of I'll cross the bye week bridge when I get there.
I like that. I like that. I'm actually going to follow up on that with another one here. Because we asked last week, guys, we had Mike Cash on the podcast last week, and I asked him the same question. What do you look at if you're going into some? It could be maybe the 2-3 turn or 3-4 turn, I guess, depending on how many players that are there. If you're in the front or back end of drafts, do you try to stack certain players? Like, first off, are you fine with stacking players? And second off, if you do that, obviously you're probably not going to get the wide receiver 1 or the RB1, but it might, or might be the wide receiver 2, like a Jalen Hurts, Devonta Smith. Are you okay with stacks like that?
Yeah, I mean that's something that I don't prioritize, especially in redraft leagues. Dynasty or best ball is a little bit different. You're playing against
Yeah.
a field of 660,000 other people, and you
Yeah.
need to kind of hit that high end range of outcomes if you want any chance of contending there. So in those, I'm willing to stack a little bit more aggressively because I know that some of those entries are just going to be lit on fire. They're going to be terrible, and it's not going to matter. I don't really care because the difference between a third place finish in your division and a 12th place finish in your division doesn't make a difference. Either way, you're not advancing. So in those best ball tournaments, I'm trying to stack because I want to get as much variance in the high end range of outcomes as possible. When I'm drafting in redraft leagues, it's typically not something I care about as much. I kind of use that as a tiebreaker in between tiers. So like, let's say, I drafted, let's just throw a name out there, Dak Prescott. I've got Dak Prescott as my quarterback, and then I'm sitting later in the draft, and I'm torn between Dontavian Wicks and Brandon Cooks. I'm going to lean towards Brandon Cooks in that scenario because I've already got Dak Prescott, and that's kind of the tiebreaker there is stacking up an offense. But typically, it's not something in the early rounds that I'm thinking about all that much in redraft.
That's good to know because I've heard a lot of different opinions on that as well as far as stacking goes. I know a lot of my friends in my home leagues are like, they're like, I'm never going to stack anybody. I don't care, what it is. And I'm just like, man, I'm okay with throwing a stack in there if it's something that's going to produce high upside.
And it will produce high upside, but it also produces a lot of downside, and that's
A
the thing
lot
that
of
we don't talk
downside
about
if it
a lot
doesn't
with
hit.
stats. So let me throw it. In my home league last year, I flew back to Chicago, drafted in person with my buddies. We're going into year 16 of this league that we've been, doing since we graduated high school. And last year, I fell into it. I had an early pick, and then at the 2-3 turn, I was able to stack Mahomes and Kelsey, which felt like it was just cheating. Like, you're going to give me Travis Kelsey at the end of round 2 and Mahomes at the top of round 3. And walking away on paper, I had never felt better about a draft. Like, I thought that I absolutely crushed that draft. You know how the story goes. Travis Kelsey gets hurt. Mahomes has a down year. And then, yeah, like, had they lived up to the potential of being QB1 and tight end 1, I'd have dominated my league. But I didn't. They both had a down year, and I missed the playoffs in my home league. And that's something that I'll probably never live down for my buddies.
Yeah, you hear that, Shane? You don't stack Mahomes and Kelsey. Shane's a big Chiefs fan, so he lives in Kansas City. So
well, hopefully we'll talk a little bit about Hollywood Brown today, because that is my ride or die for the 2024 year.
ooh, there
I
you
like that.
go. There you go. I got one more question, then we'll take a short break here. And this doesn't really have anything to do with fantasy, but we get some questions, and I want to get your perspective on it. And we're not as experienced. This is only our second or third year doing the actual podcast. So, what advice would you give a new podcaster just to get started? Do you focus on a lot of the marketing, the content creation, just the content in general, having a producer? Like, what do you guys do if you have someone that's trying to start up a new podcast? Like, what advice would you give them?
Just to genuinely be yourself. And I know that's like such a cliche, but it's true. I've seen so many people like try to be something that they aren't, and then they end up getting tripped up after a year or two because they're trying to play this character of themselves or trying to be something that they aren't genuinely. I think that especially when you're doing a lot of content, I'm doing guest spots every single week. I'm doing 5 shows a week on top of that. I'm writing articles. And like if I wasn't truly being myself, I wouldn't be able to consistently find the energy to do what I'm doing. But I also people sense it. And I think a big part of podcasts is just like people want somebody that they can listen to, feel like they're hanging out in a room with them, and they don't want it to be overly polished. I don't think they want it to be, too overly produced or anything like that. So I think it's a constant push pull, especially now, where I'm at with football guys. We want to market our content heavily. We want to have catchy SEO forward thumbnails and headlines and things like that. And we need to stay on structure with our YouTube show, but deep down, like I just want to slouch back in the chair and talk football. So there's a little bit of like, want to genuinely be yourself and while also trying to check those SEO boxes. And I think that it takes time to kind of naturally get there. I think early in my career, I was completely myself, maybe to a fault, where I was cussing and talking about politics and throwing back beers on streams.
Yeah.
And I may have alienated some of the audience that I could have had eventually by doing that. But I also got some really diehard fans early on when I was doing that as well. So I think it's kind of a balance. You want to be yourself, but you also want to make yourself as approachable as possible to as large of an audience as possible.
That's good advice. Everybody out there, if you're starting your podcast out, take that advice. That's what we try to bring some advice to everybody we possibly can. So I appreciate that. Okay. Do you guys have any more questions for him? If not, we're going to take a quick break.
I have one quick one. We had this on the show notes last time, but we didn't get to ask it. So I wanted to go ahead and toss it your way. Do you think that best ball will ultimately affect how drafts go forward in like redraft leagues and how people approach those? Or do you think that it's two separate types of, I don't know, fantasy bros?
I think that's a great question, but I think it's already happening. Like, there are so many people playing best ball now, and you're already seeing like on sleeper ADP where running backs are starting to skew further down the draft board than they were in years past. So I think we're already seeing that start to bleed in a little bit. That being said, I think that maybe as a whole we've skewed too far in the like running backs don't matter discussion, and it does open up some opportunities where you can get a little bit weird with your builds and start running back. I don't know if it's going to work this year, but it does feel kind of crazy when you can walk away from a draft of Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, and Saquon Barkley. Like that doesn't feel like something that should be possible in fantasy. So we're already starting to see best ball mind kind of bleed into redraft a little bit. But I think that they're very different games. And I saw that a lot last year where I was drafting 500 plus best ball teams. And then I get into redraft season and I'm applying a lot of what I was doing in best ball. Like I said, it was stacking and going for, 6-7 wide receivers in the first 8 or 9 rounds. And that's not necessarily the way to play redraft. And those stacks can set you up for really low downside. So we're seeing it happen, but I don't know if we should be because they're two very different formats.
Nice.
I like that.
Yeah.
All right, guys. With that being said, we'll be right back. This episode is brought to you by Nevin Eyewear. Upgrade your style and protect your eyes with Nevin Eyewear. Designed with precision and crafted for comfort, Nevin Eyewear offers a stunning range of sunglasses and optical glasses that blend fashion with function. Whether you're hitting the beach, driving, or just out for a stroll, Nevin Eyewear ensures you look your best while safeguarding your vision. Shop now and experience the perfect fusion of elegance and durability. Head over to parlaypod.com and ParlayFF on YouTube. Click the affiliate link to get the best deals possible. Don't miss out on the latest trends. Again, parlaypod.com and or ParlayFF on YouTube. That's NEVEN.com. Elevate your eyewear game today. All righty, and we are back. And I think, boys, it's time to do a little bit mock draft action. So what I have set up, guys, is we're just going to be doing a basic dynasty mock draft. We're going to have 12 teams. Hopefully we can get the room pretty much full. I know we're close. We're close to having it full, but it's just going to be a dynasty half.
I don't want to cut you off. You want me to tweet this link out real quickly? I'm sure it'll fill out pretty quickly if I tweet it out.
Oh, shoot ya. We've got, are you guys looking at the board? We have four
spots
openings
available
right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
4 spots. And while Dave's doing that, so it's just going to be a dynasty half-point PPR, 12 teams. We are going to set it to 5 minutes per pick, but if you are out there on the stream, if you're watching on YouTube, the ones that are watching and following along with it, try not to take that long. The only reason why we set it towards 5 minutes is so we can maybe talk a little bit. The 4 of us can talk a little bit about our picks and so on and so forth. And you guys know how it works. 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers. So that's going to be the little kink there. 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 flex spot, and that flex is going to be wide receiver, running back, or tight end. And then we'll just do 5 bench spots. So I think that's 13 rounds. We'll just do a little 13-round mock draft, and we'll see how it goes. Before I start it, though, we'll give some of these players some time to get in this. There's one.
There we go.
Oh yeah, Dave sent that tweet out, and it just started going. It just started filling.
Joey Wright in here as well.
Yeah.
Football guy staffer. Love seeing that.
Love it.
Is his
when you do
sleeper
these-
tag Kyle loves tacos? Because that is amazing.
I don't know who that is. Joey Wright is the Joey Wright.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I was
Kyle
like, "There's
loves
Joey."
tacos.
Yeah. You said joined, and I was like, Kyle loves tacos. Just joined. That is one of the best tags I've seen on Sleeper. I'm not gonna lie.
Got Yayrock in here. That's another football guy staffer. Corey Spela. So I see he came in here as well. He's a big dynasty head. He does a lot of writing and videos for us over at Football Guys. So he'll bring the heat in this one for sure.
And I know we have a couple of guys that are in our podcast league, like FF Tony's in here, and he's big on Twitter as well. Yeah, it's before this fills up, we'll give it a couple more minutes, Dave. What's your favorite spot to draft at when you are in these drafts? Like what spot do you prefer?
I like being in the top 3. The third spot was already picked when I went in here. So FF dude, that's one of you. Yeah. I think you got the right call taking that spot there. So I'm just hoping
That's me.
that
No, yeah, that's
we
it.
can
I
have
was just saying.
somebody fall to 4.
Yeah, I was just saying we filled up now. We're good.
All right.
Oh, we're filled. If you want to, Dave, you want to make this spicy? You want me to randomize the draft order?
No, I think we could do it as is. I
Okay.
think we're good.
All right. So I'm going to start this up. All the settings should be good to go. So D. Johnston is actually one of our writers. It's Dylan, who's one of the writers for our podcast. He's on the clock. Shane, hopefully he's not. Hopefully he's paying attention.
Well, it shows he's not currently in the Sleeper app because he doesn't have the little green button. Oh, there he is.
There he is.
There he is.
Yeah, he's better than that.
Yeah, he's watching, I think. So he heard us talking some ish and was like, let me go defend myself.
Justin Jefferson, first overall. Dave, I'm going to let you kind of speak on some of these because I want to get your opinion on some of these players who are going, early like this. Justin Jefferson. Obviously, we know the core four that could be the first overall picks. How do you feel about? We know the talent, right? The elite talent that Justin Jefferson brings to the table. But how confident are you in this year in him?
This year I do have some concerns. I know it seems like Minnesota isn't all that concerned at all. They think that he's going to be just fine and he's going to be like normal, and that's why they paid him. But at the end of the day, Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy, um, not going to be the same level of quarterback like that we saw from Kirk Cousins. So I've still got him as my sixth player on the board in redraft leagues. But really, like you said, there's kind of a top four here at the wide receiver position. I don't want to say the names of the others as we're sitting here drafting right now, but I think you take any of those top four at the number one overall spot, and you're not going to get any pushback from me. I just recently wrote an article, kind of going through every single position with my kind of putting these guys in different tiers. And this top four wide receivers, I labeled you can pry them from my cold dead fingers here because it is pretty much impossible to get these guys away from me if I've got them on my roster.
Yeah, I like it. And Jason took CeeDee Lamb at pick 102 there. I like CeeDee Lamb a lot this year. I see him going a lot in the first overall pick.
Right.
In a lot of these drafts. CeeDee Lamb, he's going to do his thing. I took CMC, and a lot of people, you can't argue with what he's doing, right? We know he's getting up there in age. The age cliff is bound to come at some point, but until that time comes, I'm going to take the best running back in the NFL that produces so much fantasy points for your roster because that's ultimately what we're looking for. And then, Dave, you got Jamar Chase.
Yeah, Jamar Chase, like I said, you can go 101, and I wouldn't push back there at all, especially in Dynasty. This is a guy who we saw last year dealt with a hip injury, also had to deal with half a year playing with Jake Browning, but he was still putting up elite production. Jamar Chase is a guy that, like we were talking about him as the consensus, unanimous wide receiver one in Dynasty just 2 years ago, and then he has one down year that was kind of out of his control with poor quarterback play and an injury, and now we've soured on him a little bit. There, Amon St. Brown goes off board. Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Amon St. Brown. You can mix all these guys up and pull a name out of a hat, and I think any of them have a pretty strong claim to be the wide receiver one.
I love it. Well, after Dave took Jamar Chase, Jonathan Taylor went at 105. Then Bijan Robinson went at 106. Kind of interesting to see Jonathan go in front of Bijan, but hey, I think Jonathan Taylor is an excellent running back, and ultimately, I do personally think that he could end up being the RB1. He's got such great talent. And I think Indianapolis is on the up and up this year, in my personal opinion. I don't know if...
Are you big on Jonathan Taylor, Dave?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of joked around about in best ball drafts about how you can get Jonathan Taylor in round 2, and it feels like cheating. But yeah, this guy is still just 25 years old. Also, last year dealt with the injury, dealt with the holdout, and then came back and was kind of in this weird timeshare with Zach Moss. But he is on a team that we know wants to run the ball with a good offensive line. He's got all the talent in the world. He's a year removed from that injury now. I think we're still looking at 3 to 4 years at least of elite production from Jonathan Taylor, where he's just going to consistently be a top 5 running back.
I absolutely agree. 100% agree. I love Jonathan Taylor. So after Bijan, Amon-Ra St. Brown went by Shane, Tyreek Hill, then MHJ went at 109, Breece Hall at 110, Garrett Wilson at 111, then FF Tony took Jahmyr Gibbs at 112, and on the turn took Puka Nacua at 201, AJ Brown, Drake London, Malik Neighbors. What do you think of the draft so far? Are you surprised by any of these picks, Dave, at all?
No, this is pretty standard. You've seen a lot of young wide receivers with some running backs mixed in there. This is pretty chalky so far. I wouldn't expect to see anything too crazy in the early rounds. The one that jumps out to me is Tyreek Hill going at 108. I think that shows that somebody's clearly trying to win now. So to pair Tyreek Hill with Chris Olave makes me scratch my head a little bit, just because Chris Olave doesn't have a great situation right now. Like, we know he's a talented player, but he and Derek Carr haven't been able to get on the same page. So if I'm drafting a guy like Tyreek Hill, I'm probably following up my second pick with the best available running back on the board, which, would have been Travis Etienne, Saquon Barkley, something like that. Because we know with Tyreek Hill, you're maybe only getting 1 or 2 years left of production. So if I'm making that claim in the first round, then I'm okay taking Tyreek Hill. I'm just pushing all the chips in and going win now. So that's a little confusing to me. But I also love what Corey did here, just going with Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors to start off the draft. I mean,
Hmm.
two rookies that realistically could find themselves in that same tier I was talking about, the top four. By mid-season, we could be looking at those guys in the same light that we're looking at CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase. So just so much upside with those first two picks that Corey made here.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah, I'm not like massively. I don't know where you have Chris Olave in your ranks. I actually have him down a little further than what I think some people do have him at, and it's solely based on the fact that I just do not believe wholeheartedly in Derek Carr, and Rashid Shaheed's going to get his. He's going to get his, and so I don't know. I just have a different opinion about Chris Olave.
Yeah, I mean, super talented player, but I mean, the hope is maybe that with the new offensive coordinator this year, they can use him a little bit more creatively because Chris Olave, he can run every route in the book, and we saw him doing that in Ohio State. And then last year they just said line up out wide, and run downfield, and that's pretty much all they asked him to do. And then you've got Derek Carr, who is like gun shy when it comes to deep shots. All he wanted to do was check down to Alvin Kamara, and you've got Chris Olave on an island, deep downfield, hoping for the ball and not getting it. We saw last year like what Chris Olave could be when he played with Jameis Winston for that like half game where he lit it up, 100 yards and 100 plus yards and a touchdown in a single half of football. Like that's what we should be seeing from Chris Olave on a week to week basis. But he and Derek Carr, man, they're just oil and vinegar. Like that is not a good mix.
Yeah, I would actually love to see Olave and Rashid Shaheed swap roles in this offense, and I think there's a good possibility that that happens because Olave should be getting more of those like developed touches, those like easy. He's the creator, he's the best guy on the field, and I feel like Rashid got a lot of those last year, and it just didn't make a lot of sense because they were just like handicapping their best player.
Yeah, and like Rashid Shaheed, he's no slouch. Don't get me wrong; like he deserves to get touches of his own. But I think you're right. It was kind of weird to see Olave as the deep threat field stretcher and Rashid Shaheed as the target hog when we know that those roles should have been flip flopped. I think you hit it on the head.
And Dave, I see you. Obviously, if you're following along on YouTube, you can see the board right now. Sam Laporte ended up going in the second round. Dave went Rome Odunze to pair with Jamar Chase. I actually really do like that combo. I really like that combo a lot.
Yeah, it's a fun start. And, Dunze, I don't have him that far behind Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors. So when I saw Malik Neighbors go off the board at 204, I thought Dunze was going to be very, very shortly after. So it was nice to see him fall to me. He was sitting at the top of my queue. I would have been happy with Waddle as well. I think that was also a good pick. And I had Laporta in my queue too. Like I said, these early rounds are kind of chalky. You kind of know what to expect. But yeah, Dunze might not have a ton of production year one. I don't know what this situation is going to look like. Chicago, who's going to be coming off the field for two wide receiver sets. But we know long term, Dunze is a baller. He's going to be tied to Caleb Williams for the next 4 to 5 years. Big fan of that talent.
Also, Yay Rock called you a homer for that pick. Just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, Yay Rock is also a Chicago guy. I really try not to let like my homerism bleed too much into my analysis, but I had a Dunze and Neighbors as my 2A, 2B in this draft class. And, I think it was kind of surprising that Chicago had a Dunze ahead of Neighbors on their board. They're very different types of players. Neighbors probably is a little bit better for fantasy because of his big playability. He can kind of rip off a score from anywhere on the field. Dunze doesn't quite have that super high-end elite long speed the way that Neighbors does. But his ability to draw targets, his ability to make contested catches, especially near the red zone, I think that's where a lot of his value is going to come from in fantasy.
So after, sorry, Jason. After Dave took Odunze there in the second round, I was on the clock at 2:10. I took Travis Etienne. I still like Travis Etienne. I know that there's been some question marks about him and this whole Tank Bigsby situation. Travis Etienne not getting much play this year or as much play. But I've heard a lot of negative things about Tank Bigsby this year, that he just does not look good, and he didn't look good in OTAs. I think Travis Etienne is still a fantastic running back. And in my opinion, just to get my RBs right there, I didn't necessarily want to go RB, but looking at the wide receiver board, the wide receiver I wanted fell to me in the third round. So Jason took Michael Pittman to pair with CeeDee Lamb. Devon Achane went at 212, and then on the 301, Zay Flowers off the board. Jason paired his wide receivers up with Saquon Barkley, and to me, Saquon Barkley in the third round is a pretty good deal. in my opinion.
I'm just hoping they don't tush push this year without Jason Kelsey, but we'll see. Hopefully, I don't get goal line sniped with them.
Again, Cam Jurgens exists, man.
I
Cam
know. I
Jurgens.
don't want to hear that right now. I don't want to hear that.
Looking on the board right now, I'm looking at running backs. I'm looking at wide receivers. Obviously, Kyron Williams is still on the board in the third round, but I think I'm going to go with a wide receiver one here. Devonta Smith is obviously first. If you're looking at sleepers, first on list on ADP. But in my opinion, he is the wide receiver two on that roster. DJ Moore, as much as the talent is there, I just don't know what's going to happen with the situation in Chicago, which receiver is going to provide the most value. I think DJ Moore is going to be the one starting the season off. And then I could eventually see Rome Odunze being the two and Keenan Allen being the three on that roster. But I'm not sure yet. DK Metcalf's still on the board. I have him high. He's a wide receiver one for Seattle. But guys, I'm gonna roll the dice with Nico Collins here. I think Nico Collins is going to be excellent receiver for the Houston Texans. He just got his extension. He's getting paid, and I think he's the number one receiver in that room.
I didn't want to be called Homer like Dave was.
I know.
Are you,
Jason's the Texans fan of the group. But what do you think about that, Dave?
Right now.
What do you think about that, Nico Collins?
He was the top IQ. That's who I was hoping was going to fall to me right there. And I did have some concerns about Nico Collins. I mean, Nico Collins is one of those guys that, you said you guys have just been doing this for a couple of years now, but you guys will experience this a few years down the road where you just love a guy. And like a guy is your guy, like you are just pounding the table for him year after year. And that was with Nico Collins. Loved him coming out of college. Loved him his first year in the league. Loved him his second year in the league. And he was my most rostered player last year in best ball. I had him in almost 35% of my leagues. Couldn't get enough of this guy. And then he broke out. And now all of a sudden he's going like round 2 in fantasy drafts. And even that feels a little bit rich for me, seeing where he's going now in Dynasty. But that extension definitely calmed some of my concerns. I think the concerns I had were, Tank Dell looked really good. Tank Dell is 6 months younger. And Tank Dell has, a longer contract. He'll be tied to CJ Stroud a little bit longer. But that extension kind of, like I said, calms those concerns a little bit. So tough to look at Nico Collins as anything other than like a top 12 dynasty wide receiver right now. He's just whether you're a film guy or an analytics guy, like he checks all the boxes. Like he looks great when you watch him play on a per route run basis, on a volume basis. He kind of does it all. So yeah, Nico Collins was slid a little bit in the draft, which I was surprised to see. Fell all the way to round 3 when I thought he would have gone a little bit higher than that. Then first 2 years were just awful quarterback play, but now we've kind of seen the good profile match up with a good quarterback, and like I said, he should be a top 12 dynasty wide receiver.
And then you took Devonta Smith, so you're going low T on the running backs.
Yeah, and that's typically, I play Dynasty. That's how I play Dynasty. I don't like investing early picks in running back, and maybe it's just because I've been burned before. When I first got into Dynasty, the first Dynasty Superflex draft that I did was going into the 2021 season, and I was drafting from 112. And I couldn't believe it that Javonte Williams and Cam Akers both fell to me. And that's how I started off my Dynasty draft. And that was a tough lesson in realizing just how volatile running backs can be. Like I said, I won a lot of teams last year with Ty Chandler, Zamir White, Kyron Williams, these guys that you're basically getting for free at the end of drafts. So I've got a lot of late round targets that I like. And I will likely be saving those late round running backs for round 8 and beyond.
And you're a homer.
So Shane,
I did pound the homer drum here. I'm sorry. It was just
you did.
I was staring at the face
Pacheco,
and I couldn't pull myself off of it.
Pacheco off the board, then DK Metcalf, and Shane was on the clock at 3:07, and he took his boy. Patrick Mahomes.
Patrick in the back half of the third round feels like a solid, safe value, and that was what my thought process was. Like it just felt too far. Like at the beginning of the third round, I probably would have passed on like a guy like gone for DK, but then DK got off the board, and I was like, well, I don't want to go the next tier down on wide receivers. And
you can tell the wide receiver well. It dried up quickly because we see 4 straight non-wide receivers going off the board.
Yeah. And then the tight end run went right after me. As soon as I drafted Patrick, all the tight ends went, and I was like, oh, damn.
Yeah, they went flying off the board. Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, then Dalton Kincaid. That's pretty nuts. And then right now, Caleb is up on the clock. So Shane, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brandon Ayuk, Patrick Mahomes, Dave has Jamar Chase, Roma Dunze, Devonta Smith. I have Chris McCaffrey, Travis Etienne, and Nico Collins. And Jason, you have CeeDee Lamb, Michael Pittman, and Saquon Barkley. What do you think of these lineups so far, Dave?
Taking a look here. I think Shane's got the best one so far. Amon-Ra, Ayuk, and Patrick Mahomes. I like that quite a bit. Patrick Mahomes was on my radar at 304, and I don't know. I never want to be the first guy to take a quarterback in a one quarterback league because I think that Mahomes is great, but there's other quarterbacks that are kind of close to him. So that's why I didn't want to take Mahomes. I'm hoping that one of the guys that I have in mind is going to make it back to me in round 4. But looking right now, I mean, you got two guys that are top 10 wide receivers in my rankings. Amon St. Brown is in that elite tier. Like, he's a guy that I would have been okay taking at 104. So getting him at 107 feels like a steal. Brandon Ayuk, I prefer him to Chris Olave, so I like that pick as well. And then, I mean, yeah, Mahomes is like, it's not fun. You don't want to be the guy taking the first quarterback off the board, but I just talked about him on a show that's going to come out tomorrow morning that we just recorded, where I talk about Patrick Mahomes being the safest pick in fantasy drafts. I mean, what we've seen throughout his career, QB 8 floor and a QB 1 ceiling, and probably not going to look at anything outside of that range of outcomes for the next decade or so. So you're getting a guy who could throw 5,500 yards and 60 touchdowns in a season. And even if he's got an off year like he did last year, he's still going to give you starting quarterback production.
Yeah, just like how you talked about like wanting to punt kind of running backs till the later end and kind of stack them up. Is that how you feel about quarterbacks if you don't necessarily get your guy that you're targeting?
Yeah, and I got to be honest, like one quarterback dynasty is a little bit out of my comfort zone. I haven't done this in a while, so
Right.
interested to see, and that's why I didn't want to be the first one to take a quarterback because there's nothing worse. Like, and Shane, this might happen to you. Like, you take Mahomes, we might not see another quarterback off the board until there's Josh Allen. So you gotta feel a
That
little
makes
bit
me feel a
better
little
about
better.
it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but
I
like
want- I didn't
you've
want
been
to be
there
the back
before. Like,
end.
you're the first one to take. Yeah, you take a QB, and then another QB doesn't go for 4 rounds, and you're like, oh man, I screwed up. Don't be that guy.
Yeah, 100%. It's always nice to feel like you're ahead of the run and not behind it at the same time, which is why, like, when after the tight ends went right after me, I was like, dang, maybe I should have swung tight end there. But then, yeah, the Josh Allen, little vindication, just a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think you made the right choice there. But like I said, I've done that before. Gosh, I was in a league recently, and I can't remember it was a sicko league. It was 18 team, 1 quarterback leagues. And Jeff Bell was in this league with me, and we had the 1 and 2 picks. It was a dynasty league. He took Josh Allen. I went Lamar Jackson, and this was a couple of years ago. And in our minds, we said, it's 18 teams, and it was a single quarterback, so there wasn't a super flex. But we said, still, that many teams, that should elevate the value of quarterbacks a little bit. Not one other quarterback went first round. So here Jeff Bell and I were sitting here with, what we thought were elite quarterbacks, and we thought, hey, let's kind of control the room a little bit. We'll draft these quarterbacks early. Everybody else will follow, and then we'll get great wide receiver value in round 2. But nobody else bit. No other quarterbacks went until round 3, and it just completely tanked our strategy.
Dang. It looks like these guys are getting on and off of the draft. I'm gonna probably do a deal if they haven't picked by like the 3-minute mark. I'm just gonna go ahead and let the computer auto pick.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
them.
I don't think there's anything wrong with pushing these through, especially if somebody's not online. It's a mock draft. I think you can push them through.
Yeah, we're gonna push them through now.
Yeah, especially
Yeah.
giving them around 2 minutes.
So Kyron Williams off the board. Second one would be CJ Stroud off the board. There's your next quarterback. Dave, is that the guy that you were hoping to fall to you?
I don't want to offend the Texas fan on the show here, the Texans fan. I like CJ Stroud, but I think we're a little over our skis with his dynasty value. Like, at the end of the day, just doesn't have that rushing upside that I want to see. And we did see, he looked great in year 1, but I kind of look at him in the same tier as like Joe Burrow, where that, if he does have a wildly efficient season, he can give you kind of middling QB1 production, but I don't think he has that elite ceiling that you're getting from Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and a handful of other quarterbacks that are on the board right now. So I like CJ Stroud a lot.